So you've done everything right. You bought the absolute best waterproofing coating, you prepped the surface to perfection, but a few months down the line, it's failing. What went wrong? Well, today we are diving deep into the one critical step that almost always gets overlooked, the mixing. It's a true paradox, where just a couple of minutes of imprecision can completely undo days of hard work.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about this idea of a critical mixing window. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty for the big three: cementitious, epoxy, and crystalline systems. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with some super practical tips and really drive home why getting this right is so important.
This is the big question, isn't it? The mystery that can drive you crazy. You're sure you did everything by the book, but the answer, and you might be surprised here, often isn't about what you used, but how you used it. Specifically, how that material was mixed long before it ever touched a single surface.
Okay, let's get into it. Every single coating has what I like to call a Goldilocks zone for mixing. Not too short, not too long, it has to be just right. And this isn't just about making it look smooth. This is about chemistry. It's about activating the material's properties so it can actually do its job and perform at its peak.
Really, the whole problem comes down to these two culprits. On one side, you've got undermixing, which is a recipe for a weak, inconsistent product. And on the other side, you have overmixing, which can literally ruin the coating's workability before you even get started. Both roads lead straight to failure. They just take slightly different routes to get there.
Let's start with the most common one out there: cementitious coatings. These things are workhorses. They're incredibly effective, but you have to respect the mixing process. It really is a delicate balancing act.
So what are we aiming for? What's the magic number? For most cementitious products, you're shooting for a mix time of about 3 to 5 minutes, and you've got to use a low-speed electric mixer. Your goal is a perfectly smooth, lump-free consistency. That right there, that's your window for success.
Now, I know it's tempting. You're on a deadline, you want to get the job done faster, so you cut the mixing time a little short. But trust me, undermixing doesn't save you time. It sabotages the entire project right from the start, creating these invisible weaknesses that, believe me, will show up later.
In a batch that's been undermixed, the different components just aren't spread out evenly. Think about making a cake, but you've got pockets of dry flour in the batter. Those spots are never going to bake right. It's the same idea here. You get soft spots that never fully cure, a blotchy look, and this is the big one, weak adhesion. The coating can literally just peel right off.
But listen, more is not better. Mixing for too long doesn't make it stronger. It actually stops helping and starts creating a whole new set of problems. You're actively damaging the material.
See, overmixing creates its own disaster. You're essentially whipping air into the mix, which creates these tiny bubbles. Later on, those bubbles become weak points, pinholes in your final waterproof barrier. The material also gets way too thick to apply smoothly, and it starts hardening right there in the bucket. That dramatically cuts down your working time, your pot life. All right, now let's level up and talk about the more sensitive stuff. With epoxy and crystalline systems, you're not just blending anymore. Now you are kicking off a very precise chemical reaction. And honestly, the stakes are even higher.
I love this quote because it just nails it. For epoxy, mixing isn't just blending, it's igniting the chemical reaction. You've got two parts that are stable on their own, the resin and the hardener. The second you mix them, a timer starts, and mixing it properly is the only way you make sure that reaction happens completely and evenly.
For the majority of epoxy systems, the absolute non-negotiable minimum mixing time is 3 minutes. That ensures that every single molecule of resin gets a chance to find and bond with a molecule of hardener. That's how you create that tough, cross-linked barrier you're paying for.
And just like with cementitious coatings, there are two ways to get it wrong. Undermix it, and you're guaranteed to have spots that are permanently soft and sticky because the chemistry just never finished. Overmix it, and you're back to those annoying air bubbles and a product that starts to set way too fast to even use.
Now, crystalline systems are a different animal altogether. They work by actually growing crystals inside the pores of the concrete to block water. For that to happen, the active chemicals have to be perfectly, evenly distributed through the whole mix. If they're not, you'll have unprotected pathways for water to sneak right through.
And that's exactly why the recommended mixing time is even longer for these. We're talking a minimum of 5 minutes. That gives you the time to make sure those vital, active chemicals are spread out perfectly, giving the product the ability to seal deep inside the concrete and even self-heal tiny cracks later. It's amazing stuff, but only if you mix it right.
Okay, so that's the science behind it. Now let's get practical.
How do we take all this knowledge and make sure you get a perfect mix every single time out on the job site?
For cementitious products, the rules are simple, but they are absolutely non-negotiable. 1. Ditch trying to mix by hand. Always use a low-speed electric mixer so you don't whip air into it. 2. Measure your liquids precisely. And 3. Never ever mix a partial bag. The components can separate during shipping and you'll completely throw off the engineered formula.
Now, for two-part epoxies, the process is even stricter. A good pro tip is to briefly mix Part A and Part B in their own buckets first, just to get them uniform before you combine them. Use the right tool, like a Jiffy mixer, that actually scrapes the sides and bottom of the bucket. And keep an eye on the temperature. Heat is like a gas pedal for the curing process. And whatever you do, don't even think about adding extra hardener to speed things up. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
And finally, always remember you're not mixing this stuff in a lab. The world around you matters. The ideal temperature is usually between 5 and 35 degrees Celsius. Extreme cold, crazy heat, or high humidity can totally change how the product cures and performs. And always, always make sure you have good ventilation.
So, let's bring it all home. We've seen how a simple process, one that only takes a few minutes, can literally be the deciding factor between the success or failure of an entire waterproofing project. It all comes down to precision. So let's just quickly recap those key numbers. For cementitious, you're in that 3 to 5 minute sweet spot to avoid inconsistent curing. For epoxy, it's a hard minimum of 3 minutes for a complete reaction. And for crystalline, you need at least 5 minutes to make sure you get that even distribution. 3 different materials, 3 different windows of opportunity for success.
And this right here, this is the bottom line. You can go out and spend a fortune on the most advanced coating technology in the world, but all of that quality becomes completely meaningless if your mixing process is flawed. The best materials are only ever as good as their application.
So, I'll just leave you with this one question to think about on your next job. When you really weigh the potential costs, the rework, the wasted material, the damage to your reputation, against just a few extra minutes of careful, precise mixing, well, the choice becomes pretty crystal clear, doesn't it?